Enforceable, not a suggestion. A document federal law requires for 7.5 million students. And one of those 7 required parts isn't about the student at all. It exists to protect the adult standing in front of them. Pin that because we'll come back to it.
Hey, this is Erica. Binding is the right word. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, usually shortened to IDEA, doesn't ask a district for a good plan. It sets a legal floor, and the IEP proves the floor was met. A floor isn't a goal.
This is where the series starts, and we start here for a reason. Every episode after this takes one part apart in order.
Lewis here, 34 CFR 300.320. One section. Everything we say today comes out of it.
Nothing about that is figurative. Federal regulation defines a free, appropriate public education, FAPE, as services provided in conformity with an IEP. Conformity. If what happens in your room doesn't match that page, the child isn't getting what the law promised.
Think of it like a building code. IDEA is the national minimum. Your state can build higher, and most of them have.
One catch, though. Unlike a building code, this floor moves depending on where you stand. Take the evaluation clock. Federal regulation gives a district 60 days from parental consent to finish an initial evaluation unless the state set its own. Same law, different deadline.
When one of us says federal today, we mean federal. The kitchen table version, this is the floor every state stands on, and yours may have added a story.
1975, President Ford signs Public Law 94-142. Before it, a child with a disability had no federal right to be in the building. Every part we walk traces back to that signature.
Half a century of law, Lewis. Why does it still land on a first-year teacher's desk with no instructions?
Here's what nobody tells that teacher. There's no federal IEP form, not one. The regulation says what the document must contain. Every state builds its own paperwork around that list. Different form, identical legal contents.
One question decides everything that comes after it, and almost nobody asks it out loud. What actually makes an IEP legally binding?
Not the signatures, the contents.
Then it isn't a wish list. It's a floor with your name written on it.
A floor. With names.
Then let's go read it. All 7 in the order the regulation puts them. Real quick, because this next part matters to you. If any of this is helping, tap that like button, then hit subscribe and ring the bell so the next one finds you. Both are free and take about a second, but they tell the algorithm to show this to one more person who needs it. Right, different animal entirely. Professor Adeyemi is at the desk to help with this one. We aren't summarizing the law today, we're reading it. I'll go first with the thing I had backwards. I thought present levels was where you described the forget describe. I thought it was a summary of the child. It sits at the top and reads like prose.
It isn't a summary, it's a baseline. The regulation asks 2 things: where the student is now, and how the disability affects progress in the general curriculum.
People say present levels like it's one thing, it's 2. Academic achievement is the reading number, the math number. Functional performance is whether the student can start a task alone. Teams write the first, skip the second.
The full name is Present Levels of Academic Achievement and Functional Performance. People just say PLAAFP.
Start at the top, and the first 3 parts are one chain. Part 1, present levels, where the student is and how the disability affects progress in the general curriculum. Part 2, measurable annual goals. Part 3, how progress toward them gets measured and reported. Now read that backwards. No baseline in Part 1, nothing for Part 2 to grow from, nothing for Part 3 to measure. A vague present levels paragraph makes the next 2 indefensible.
Let me put the actual page in front of you. Not our summary of the law, the printed regulation.
A written statement, developed, reviewed, and revised in a meeting. That's the regulation's own definition, word for word. Then 4 words that do the work, and that must include.
And the first item is present levels of academic achievement and functional performance. Both halves, deliberately, a student can read on grade level and still not organize a 3-step assignment.
Skip that half and you have written a report card.
I go through a regulation the way I go through used bookstores, so I never trust the front table. Part 2 is the one everybody thinks they understand. measurable annual goals. And measurable is real, which people hear as
Numbers. Put a percentage in it and the goal is compliant.
fair, but measurable is the floor, not the standard, and here's the ruling. In 2017, the Supreme Court decided Andrew F. versus Douglas County unanimously. Measurable and appropriate aren't the same word.
Then measurable isn't enough.
Look at what the court threw out. Before 2017, the test was merely more than de minimis, barely there, progress passed.
What replaced it is a higher bar. Progress appropriate to the child in light of that child's circumstances. The Education Department's guidance says IEP goals have to be appropriately ambitious. Barely anything no longer passes. Which is why I worry every spring when goals get copied forward. A copied goal is easy to defend in the room and impossible to defend against that sentence a year later.
Hold the number, Lewis. 7 parts. Everyone lives in that single section, and we've walked 3 of them.
Except all of that. But if the student's needs change in October, does the list change with them?
The list never changes, the contents are fixed. What changes is that the team has to revise them.
Revise. You said revise, not update. Which means a meeting or the amendment route, not a teacher quietly rewriting a goal in the file.
Correct, and that's where districts get in trouble. The team revises it. Never one person with good intentions and a login. And this isn't a small caseload problem. In the most recent federal count, school year 2022 to 2023, 15% of all public school students were served under IDA, 1 in 7.
1 in 7. And before we get to the end of this, there's a subsection I want to show you that puts a legal duty on your building to tell you your part in it.
But first, there's a 4th part in this section with nothing to do with the student. So who do you think it's written for?
For you, not for the student. Part 4 is written for the adult who has to make it happen.
Say that again slowly. How does a line like that sit in a document a whole year with nobody knowing?
Paragraph A4. Most people read the first half and stop. Stop reading, I should say, because the sentence keeps going. After the services and supplementary aids, it requires a statement of the program modifications or supports for school personnel that will be provided. School personnel, that's you.
Pinned that one up top. There it is. Written in, it obligates them to give you something. Left blank, nothing at all.
You're right that it obligates them, and I'll concede the limit first. The same sentence says based on peer-reviewed research, to the extent practicable. So the sharper question isn't whether they owe you support, it's what counts as support.
The regulation gives you no list, which is the answer nobody wants. It gives you a category. Training is the one everybody thinks of first.
Wider than training, coaching, materials, a consult block so the specialist and the classroom teacher actually meet. All of it counts. All of it can be written in. If you hold one sentence from today, hold that one. The document can obligate them to help you.
Supports for school personnel that will be provided. 8 words buried in the longest sentence in the section and the only part of it addressed to the adults.
I catch myself doing a version of this with the tomatoes on my windowsill. Telling a plant it's doing well isn't the same as watering it. This box isn't for encouragement. It's for the thing that changes Tuesday.
A potluck dinner. Bear with me. The sign-up sheet is the services page. The dish beside your name is the service. The time next to it's the frequency. And the person who wrote nothing is the one everybody discovers at 7 o'clock.
Fine, Lewis, but a potluck survives if somebody brings extra. What happens when a teacher quietly covers the gap? Because that's where it breaks. At a potluck, the person who covers is a hero. Here, they're the reason the record says a service happened when it didn't.
Plainly then, the document says what the district will provide, and a teacher absorbing the gap doesn't change what is owed. Not even a long clause, a dozen words, 11, exactly. From here, I'm calling that page the sign-up sheet. Part 4 and Part 7 together are exactly that.
Part 5. The regulation asks for an explanation of the extent, if any, to which the child will not participate with non-disabled children in the regular class. Read the direction of it. You aren't asked to justify including the student. You're asked to justify the time spent somewhere else.
Slow down for this next bit. It gets played twice.
Least restrictive environment, LRE. the most misquoted phrase in this field because people hear it as a synonym for full inclusion. It isn't. It's an individualized determination along a continuum.
For one child, that's a whole part of the day gone. I have the page here, somewhere, there, extent if any. 3 words, and people walk straight past them.
Part 4 hands you a tool. Part 5 hands you a burden of proof.
Tool and proof. Correct.
Professor Adeyemi is back with us, and she has already handed you 2 things you can use, different territory now. These parts put a clock and a number on it.
Parts 6 and 7, the boring ones, the ones districts get found on.
Part 7 is what Lewis is calling the sign-up sheet, and I'm stealing it. The regulation wants the projected date for the beginning of the services, then the anticipated frequency, location, and duration, none optional.
Frequency, location, duration, which is why as needed isn't a service. It states no frequency and no duration. A parent can't hold anyone to it, and neither can you.
When you see as needed on a services page, that isn't flexibility. No, forget flexible. It's a gap nobody noticed. Let me put a real week on the board. Minutes are where this stops being abstract.
Take a composite student, a stand-in built from the kind of services page you'll actually open. Specialized reading, 5 days a week, 30 minutes each. 150 minutes. And language twice a week, 60. Occupational therapy, once a week, 30. And the consult block we just argued about, 30 more. That one belongs on the sheet too, and almost never is.
270 minutes a week, owed, every week.
1 in 7. Multiply that page by every one of them in your building, and you start to see how minutes get quietly
Who actually checks that the minutes on the page happened?
rounded. That was my word. And the honest answer is often nobody, until somebody asks for the log, which is why the regulation puts it in writing at all.
Part 6 is the one people forget until March. The IEP has to state any individual accommodations the child needs on state and district-wide assessments. Pick an alternate assessment instead, and the IEP has to say why.
Take a composite example. A first-year resource teacher, call her Priya, 22 cases handed to her in September, finds the words as needed under a speech line. And the meeting that made that page was
Wait, was that her page or one she inherited?
inherited, written a year before she set foot in the building. Which is the hinge, because the obligation transferred with the caseload.
She owns a promise she never made, Erica. Which is the job.
Her fix is in the same section. Paragraph 6 gives her the date and the frequency so she can see what was promised.
A 7.
A 7? Thank you. 6 is the assessments. 7 is the dates and the minutes.
Which brings us to the 2 parts that aren't there on day 1. They switch on when the student turns
16.
16 under federal law, earlier in several states, and that gap is where people get this wrong.
There it is on the page. The projected date for the beginning of the services and modifications, and the anticipated frequency, location, and duration. Underneath it, transition services. Beginning not later than the first IEP in effect when the child turns 16.
Paragraph C is the one that sneaks up. Not later than 1 year before the child reaches the age of majority under state law, the IEP has to state the student has been informed the rights will transfer. State law sets the age.
A warning before the paperwork changes hands. My allotment gives better notice than
The leaks are thriving. The carrots are a national humiliation.
the carrots are a private matter.
Anyway, 1 year before the age of majority, and the age itself is your state's.
Professor Adeyemi, thank you. Both halves of present levels, and the reason as needed isn't a service.
Seconded, and I'm keeping the second half.
Then take one with you. Nearly all of this describes what the school will do. So what happens when the person who must do it never reads the page?
Everything so far is what the document says. The next few minutes are where teachers lose their footing and where the law hands something back.
Then nothing happens, and nothing is the violation. Which is the answer to her question.
Right. Say the rest of it.
A plan nobody reads is a plan nobody follows.
The regulation saw that coming, which is exactly why the next section exists.
This is the one you promised us back at the desk.
It is 300.323, paragraph D. The one I said most teachers never hear about.
What does it actually do?
The IEP has to be accessible to each teacher responsible for implementing it. Accessible meaning available to you. Findable, I mean. Not locked in somebody else's cabinet.
There's a second half. Read it.
Each teacher and provider is informed of his or her specific responsibilities for implementing that IEP.
Informed, not available on request. So somebody owes you a conversation,
Somebody has to tell you.
which in practice means the case manager sends a summary and everybody just,
That isn't what the reg says. It says informed of specific responsibilities. Specific, yours. A summary isn't a responsibility. Read me the words.
Is informed of his or her specific responsibilities related to implementing the child's IEP.
fine, specific. I'll stop softening it.
And it runs both directions, because the moment you're informed, you can be held to.
You can also ask for it in writing. Nobody mentions that part.
Held to it, yes, Cynthia. That's the trade, and it's a good one.
How often does any of this get looked at again?
Two answers there. Do you mean the whole document or the placement?
The whole document.
Then about a year, not less than annually. Exactly. Same thing, said carefully.
Sooner if goals aren't being met, which means the annual review is a ceiling, not a schedule. A deadline that's also a maximum. Bureaucratic poetry.
The classroom end of this is Cynthia's lane, not mine.
Monday version then. Find the document, that's move 1, and you have a right to it. Then read the services page before you read the goals.
Copy the minutes into your own schedule. Yours, not the files.
And ask for your Part 4 supports by name.
Then log what you deliver every week. That's the whole system.
Watch what that looks like in a room. She changes the lesson halfway through.
There, she drops the plan mid-lesson, then goes desk to desk checking the work against it.
Nothing in that is dramatic, and that's exactly the point. Implementation is small, and it happens every day.
One more thing you can do tonight, and it costs nothing. Open the regulation yourself on the Department of Education's IDEA site. The section sits there in plain text. But the button on the right is the one that matters because it takes you to your state's rules.
Federal floor on the page. State rules on the button.
Two things to carry out of here. The document is the promise, and your Tuesday is the proof. Part 4 can obligate them to support you.
The minutes on the page are owed every week.
Next time we build the first part properly. A present level statement that holds up. How to get from Maria struggles with reading to a baseline, a data source, and an effect on access.
Every one of the 6 parts after it stands on that paragraph. Worth building properly.
If this made the document less frightening, hit like and subscribe. And send it to the person down the hall who just got handed 22 cases. What's sitting in your students' IEPs that nobody ever told you about? Go find the document. I'm Cynthia, and I'll see you at the next one.